Hello, my name is Robin Electus, and this is my second review vlog, and I'm going to do it about Citizen Kane, a movie that came out in 1941 by Orson Welles. The movie is mostly about a man named Charles Foster Kane, who was a very rich newspaperman. In the beginning of the movie, it shows him on his deathbed and him saying his last words, which was the word rosebud, and then him passing away. After that scene, it cuts to a group of men who are trying to write an article about Mr. Kane as a way to honor him, but they're still kind of confused as to what rosebud meant to him. So they come up with a plan to obtain or collect information from the people who were in his life and other accounts of his life to figure out the connection with Mr. Kane and the word rosebud. After coming up with a plan to figure out what Rosebud meant, a reporter named Jerry Thompson goes out and travels to many different cities to try and collect information about Mr. Kane's life. There, he finds out about what happened in his first marriage, in his second marriage, why both of them ended, and how and why Mr. Kane is who he was at the time. Through his days of traveling, Mr. Thompson ends up finding out that Mr. Kane is just a man who spent his whole life trying to find love and affection from whoever would give it to him, and he would a lot of the times would do whatever it takes to get that love and affection. For example, always fighting for the underdog and while running his newspaper, or supporting his second wife in her music career, even though it never really was her dream completely. Everyone in Mr. Kane's life knew that he was a good, honest man, but sometimes he would let his pursuit of love and affection get the better of him. So by the end of the movie, Mr. Thompson, he interviewed everyone that he could, found all the accounts that he could of Mr. Kane's life, but could not figure out what Rosebud meant to Mr. Kane. Uh, he ended up giving up, and by the end of the movie, he went to Mr. Kane's huge mansion where he kept all of his keepsakes, all the statues that he's bought and collected from all over the world, all of his keepsakes from his life, from when he was younger, his mother's life, everything. He kept it there at his palace. So Mr. Thompson went there with some other reporters to just photograph it, and was just hoping that those photographs of his statues would be enough for the article, seeing as how he couldn't figure out what rosebud meant. However, after they leave, the camera pans throughout Mr. Kane's collection of statues and other keepsakes, and it pans to his childhood sled that he used during the winter before he moved to New York. Uh, and it's in that moment the audience figures out what rosebud meant. It was just him trying to remember his childhood and where he was before he became the Charles Foster Kane, when he was just Charlie Kane, a little boy living in a small town with his mother and father. During one of Mr. Thompson's interview, we learned that the first time Mr. Kane utters the word rosebud, like before he dies, is after his second wife leaves him, and he destroys his bedroom because he's very upset. And as he's destroying it, he comes across this snow globe, and when he sees the snow globe, it immediately reminds him of the day that he left his hometown, his mother and his father, to go live in New York and have a better life and a better education. And I think at that point he just wanted to think about a time where he was his happiest and was more content with his life, instead of at that moment when he was now this rich man, but he lost his second wife. He's now living alone in this big, huge palace that he was making for his wife, but now she's left, and he doesn't have all of his friends that he once had before. And he's just in that moment when he sees the snow globe, he just thinks of when he was a kid, and he wants to go back to that time where it was just him playing outside in the snow with his sleigh named Rosebud. And I think that's kind of sad because he spent his whole life, after leaving his mother, he spent his whole life trying to get back that happiness that he had when he was with his mother, when he was with his Rosebud. And he never really got a chance to get that happiness back. And I feel like in that moment when he first says when he first says Rosebud, he realizes that he after all this work and all this heartbreak and these trials that he's been through, he still hasn't gotten back there, and that just made him very sad, and it made me very sad because I definitely feel like there's times in my life where I'm not feeling my best, and I think back to when I was a kid and when things weren't as hard as they are now. So I felt really bad for Mr. Kane in that moment because uh, you know it's just sad to think that he never even with all that work, he never really got back to that place that he was at when he was a child. Okay, now I'm going to talk about my favorite scene. My favorite scene comes about halfway through the movie, and it's the scene where it shows the progression of Mr. Kane and his first wife, Emily's marriage. So when they first show it and they first start talking about his first marriage to Emily, who's the president's niece, he it shows them being completely enamored with each other. They're so much in love. They say I love you so much, you're beautiful, everything. And then the next scene it cuts, and then the next scene is just them talking about how much time he spends at the newspaper. And uh slowly but surely, after scene, it's just them becoming more distance with each other. I'm pretty sure even in the beginning of the scene, they're eating breakfast at a table, and they're like really like they sit really close to each other, and they're like right there, and they're looking at each other, and they're loving each other. But by the end of the scene, they're barely talking to each other because he spends so much time at the newspaper and she feels so neglected. They're sitting at the ends of the table, and they can barely even look at each other. So I thought that was really cool because it could have been this whole extravagant scene, or just like more like a longer scene of them going through their marriage. That could have been his marriage to her, could have been a movie itself, but they were somehow able to fit it into a scene that was literally 2 minutes. And I just thought that was so cool because it was just so much information compacted into this small little window of time. I also love how in that scene you can visibly see Mr. Kane getting older by each cut, because the whole scene is supposed to be a span over years of his marriage. And I just thought that was really interesting to have so much time compacted into literally 2 minutes. I just found that really interesting. Overall, I really enjoyed this movie. I thought it was really fun to watch. I really liked Orson Welles as a director. I think he did a really good job in as Mr. Kane. I really enjoyed that as well. Um, yeah, and that's it. Thank you.